It's now my pleasure to moderate the plenary session that is called When the World Arrives, What Cities Can Learn When Mobility is Stress Test, and what better place than Rome to discuss about this topic. So I will immediately ask the four speakers to join me here on stage next to me while I'm introducing the topic. So we have Eugenio Patanè, Deputy Mayor for Sustainable Mobility and Transport from Rome. We have Lars Strömgren, Vice Mayor for Transport and Urban Environment from Stockholm. Elke van den Brandt, Minister of Mobility, Public Work and Road Safety from Brussels Capital Region. And Maro Evangelidou, Deputy Mayor of Urban Regeneration and Resilience from Athens. So indeed, we have in many cities, not only here in Rome, but particularly also in Rome, the fact that there are a lot of huge events taking place, there are a lot of tourists coming to your cities, and this creates, of course, a lot of traffic and mobility in the cities, and sometimes it may clash with the mobility of the permanent citizens that are also there. And we want to focus in this discussion about how you manage these tensions and maybe even sometimes see opportunities. So we think that it needs political will, leadership sometimes about making some changes, maybe also sometimes to find the right balance between the different needs of the locals and of tourists. What are also the infrastructures that you need to handle it, and also the digital solutions that can also sometimes be quite useful. And the idea is really with the insights from your four different cities to see indeed how actually you prevent and manage the tensions that exist in this field, and have some practical solutions that can be maybe inspiring for other cities here. Highlight the local strategies that also make sure that we can still maintain accessibility and safety for the people when there are so many people around traveling, particularly for pedestrians, other weaker participants of the local mobility, and also what kind of governance we need, because obviously cities can do a lot, but we need, I think, also sometimes the regional level, the national level, and the European level, of course, to support you in your cities. And then indeed to see how all this can feed into the next EU sustainable tourism strategy that we already discussed also this morning there. So I will immediately start with Eugenio. Last year actually you had the Jubilee here in Rome, and you showed that the Pope came here to this place actually because you managed to bring together 33 million visitors to Rome, and you managed to organize the mobility for these visitors, and still also with the local people, of course. So maybe you can share a little bit how you managed this huge challenge, and also what you maintained from this stress test for your city for the future.
Yes, it was a stress test. And one of the stress tests, the most difficult that the mobility system of our city have ever faced with. We talk about millions and millions of people coming here on the top of a city that handles every day just 4 million people coming, not just from the inside of the city, but also from the outside. So we take a choice early on when we're talking about the Jubilee, and we decide that we will not manage the Jubilee, but we will use it, the Jubilee. And so the result was some legacies that we brought now in these days. There are three kind of legacies. The first one is infrastructural, because the mayor talked just before what we did, the opening of the two new stations in the Line C, the museum station, but at the same time the electric buses. We have 65 electric buses, and also with the electrification of the depots, and at the same time a lot of kilometers of cycle path, the most important one and the iconic one. There will be a site visit tomorrow in the Monte Ciocci Vaticano. There is the continuity of the Francigeno Way to the Vatican using an ancient railway bridge, and then a lot of pedestrian area. And the most iconic one is the Piazza Pia, just around Castel Sant'Angelo in front of the Vatican. There were just place for the cars. There will be a pedestrian area, just car-free ever. So infrastructural legacy is the first one. The second, I think, is the operational legacy, because we start with a coordination structure with inside the policymakers, or the administration, the police, the civil protection, and bus and transport operators. And we never had an integration of this body on the executive decision on the street like that. And I think that this is now not an exceptional structure, but is a new normal. And if I tell you the emergency that we have during the Jubilee, you won't believe that. I'm not just talking about the big emergency, the death of the Pope, the election of the Pope. There were events that we couldn't never suppose. And I'm talking also about the little problems that we have. I just want to tell you a story. One of the events of the Jubilee was the procession of all the statues of Saint Mary coming from all over the world. And there's one of the statues of Saint Mary that was 7 meters tall, the Saint Mary of Malaga. And it would be on procession in the streets of Rome from 1.5 kilometers. And so we have dismantled the electric of the tramway in 5 days, and then rebuild it. And so it was an emergency that if you didn't manage with the coordination of all the body executive on the street, you wouldn't manage. And the third legacy is cultural. In the I-11 meeting, just Elke was talking about something that is very important. If you, in this kind of event, push the line forward and push the goals forward, there's a legacy, a cultural legacy that you are leaving in the city, a cleaner city, a quieter city, a sustainable city. And so I think that if you make your expectation high of the people, you're getting a pressure on politics that is something that makes you improve in the future and also in the present. That's it.
Thanks a lot. A very interesting perspective, actually, to use these challenges as a boost for sustainable urban mobility, actually, and see it as an opportunity. I think it's a very interesting angle. Lars, in Stockholm, you did not have the Jubilee, but you have a very long-term strategy on sustainable urban mobility, and still you try to make sure that those who are walking in the city and that are cycling in the city can also resist to large events, some tensions, maybe also sometimes the weather conditions. How do you manage this, that also the fact that walking and cycling is becoming so popular in your city that it's also not creating too much crowded and stress?
So Stockholm is not Rome, but it is Stockholm. And I think that's what's so interesting when we meet in venues like this, that you see, you can recognize things in other cities, but you also realize that you have to do your own thing with it. We don't so often have these huge events, but we have smaller events during the whole year. And what's very peculiar and very specific in Stockholm is the weather. So the same amount of people who in the summer swim and take part of the water were some weeks ago walking around on the ice outside the city hall. So you always need to use your difficulties and in a way to make it attractive to tourists. There are two things I think are very interesting. First of all, since less and less mandatory activities are done in the public space, We can do a lot on our phones, we can do a lot at home. The city needs to attract people in order to make them spend time in the city. And in that way, I think what you have to do in order to attract tourists is a little bit similar to what you have to do in order to make people who live in your city to feel at home and want to spend time in the city. That's one thing that I think is interesting in this subject. Another is the fact that post-COVID, people work a little different. Some in my city, Mondays and Fridays, people work from home. They travel a little bit differently. So the way we have dimensioned and planned our public transport system, very much the peak hour, very much the man with a suitcase going to the factory, that has also changed. So we need also, when we plan our routes and so on, realize that we need to be more flexible. We need to sort of find a system that is more balanced than just back and forth. What we have done in order to increase cycling and walking is very much that we try to make as many people as possible cycling during the summer. The investments we do in bike paths, they also contribute to tourists being able to take part of the city. And then during the winter, we also invest a lot in winter maintenance. And we know that if you don't cycle in the summer, it's not so common that you start to cycle in the winter. But if you cycle during the winter, you are probable that you keep on cycling. So that's a little bit the way we think in encouraging active mobility all year round.
Good, thanks a lot. A lot about resilience, indeed. Elke, if we move to Brussels capital regions, you also have regularly youth events, and we at Eurocities, of course, see it with all the European summits, of course, that sometimes can be foreseen, but sometimes not, and I have the feeling that more and more they become frequent. So how do you deal with these regular youth events and use it also to adapt your mobility strategy?
I have to admit that having events and manifestations, it's day-to-day business. We don't see it as special. We're proud to be the heart of Europe, and it comes along with a lot of visits, a lot of events, a lot of manifestations, and the answers we need to those events are the same as the answers we need for our visitors and the people living in Brussels, and it is in multimodality. It's not taking it as a slogan, it's not an application on your phone, it's really a guideline for your policy choices. For example, we invested a lot in public transport last 5 years. We have an increase of 15% of the offer of public transport, new tram lines, new bus lines, and it has an impact. I'm proud of our public transport, and we really see that people, young people and old people, rich, poor, young, old, are using this public transport. The same for cycling. Brussels was, or still is not seen as a cycling city. I see people from the Netherlands laughing, I know. But we're working on it, and offering cycling infrastructure has tripled the use of the bike in Brussels, which is, for our town, a very, very big difference. The same for walking. Having safe sidewalks makes people walk, and it's the best innovation there exists. It's our 2 legs, it's for free, you don't have to recharge it, it's always accessible. So it's one of the best technologies we have. So walking is the first way to get around in Brussels. It is the new reality. It has passed public transport and car use. So this multimodality is good for big events because it gives you alternatives on moments that parts of the city are closed down and the cars are stuck in traffic. But it's also good for the inhabitants. It is a win-win. We have tested for you decades of car-oriented policy, and I can tell you, spoiler, it doesn't work. So it's bad for everybody. You have traffic jams, everybody is stuck in traffic. It's not good for road security, it's not good for air pollution, it's not good for your stress. Nobody wins. But if you invest in those alternatives, you gain space, so you can use those space for other things. You invest in a city where people walk and cycle, where they can meet each other. So it is also good for people living in your city. And so this win-win is the only answer we can give to those big events and those stress tests. And it sounds easy. Of course, we have to do it, but know, and I think every policymaker knows that changing habits, changing your roads, every time you put in a cycle lane, a bus lane, every time you have to fight for budgets, everything is a fight, but it's worthwhile, and it changes your city. And the best compliment that you can give me is Brussels has changed, and people are saying that yes, Brussels has changed, and that's why I like politics.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think that we at Eurocities also, we can see that you can cycle more and more, and we are happy also that you continue the fight and that you're not going backwards. We are very happy about this. Maro, in Athens, it's also a city where the car had played a very important role, and still it's also a city where there are more and more tourists that maybe do not use so much the car. Do you also see then tourism as an opportunity actually to move forward to sustainable urban mobility to a certain extent?
The answer is yes, of course. We do believe that tourism pressure could be a good opportunity and not only a challenge, but an opportunity to change mentalities. But the problem is that not everybody believes that. And since we are not, we are a small, the municipality of Athens is a small part of the agglomeration. And yet it has a very little competences on mobility issues and on public transport. We don't have any interfere in at all. Now we are trying to get municipal buses, pointing on this, on the new climate funds and on mobility poverty, and we hope we can achieve on that. But anyway, it is interesting to see how the mega events, the city mega events, can influence to change policy agenda, as Rome said before. And we have had a good example in 2004 with the Olympics, where we have been obliged to finish the line 2. But still, it was just, we didn't have the second legacy, the set on governance structures to oblige us to have this multi-level governance, which is so needed for mobility policies. The practice was to create special agencies and not to repair the whole thing. So we still work on that. What is interesting, since I saw in Italy also you have a referendum is for a constitution, is that we are trying to open this question of the role of local authorities in creating policies. We don't have any, for example, our regulations limits are very limited. The day before I left, yesterday, I had received 6 pages report on saying where our regulations on scooters were not legal, because the central law didn't let local authorities to interfere on that. They have to think about what to let us do. It's really a very strange and a very, as I said this morning, not very European practice, but anyway. So what we are trying is to change mentalities, and we are trying by our local policies. For example, we have a program named the 15 minutes neighborhood, in order to help walkability, in order to enlarge walk sides, but still the problems are not very easy to tackle, but we are trying to, for example, a big issue is the parking policy, which it's not obvious that it will help if you just not let parking. It's not obvious that it will happen change of mentality. So we're trying to find the way to build buildings on parking lots to help inhabitants housing areas. So I don't know. I think I have finished.
Good. And
last question.
you made a bridge already to the second round, because you have all explained how you are driving the transition towards a sustainable urban mobility, but we all know that it's not so easy, and I mean you have to fight quite a lot as politicians. So in order to drive this shift, you need to coordinate a lot, you need to negotiate also a lot, and you need also to maintain a long-term vision while also working on crisis and short-term decisions. So I would like to dive a little bit more into this, and Lars in particular, what according to you are the governance models, the pricing policies, the regulatory reforms, the communication strategies that allow you actually to drive this transition?
I think it's something that we have done a lot is testing things, starting small and growing it. For example, we call it the livable streets, where you remove parking and you let the cafes and shops go out. And it started 10 years ago with only one street, and there were protests, and then every year some more, and now we have 60 places like that. So that's something that really works. Then what we also have tried a lot is sort of to make the issue with tourism can be when a lot of tourists come at one time, from the cruise ships or very few spots and a lot of people at one specific time. So when we push a larger area to be interesting for visitors and tourists, and I think we've done that through trying to reverse it, to think like, how can we make the Stockholmer a tourist in his own city? So for example, the old town of Stockholm, that's the place where you pass when you take the subway every morning. 350,000 people see the old town from the window. And we have now, during the last years, trying to make as many people as possible who pass the old town to want to step out and to take part of it and to shop in the small shops and so on. And that worked quite well, so now we have expanded that idea to create sort of hubs for small shops, cafes, and so on. And I think by spreading it out more, the tourism is actually not so complicated. It's just consumption, not where you live, so to speak. And if you can get more people taking part of that in a larger area of the city, it brings a lot also, both for the visitors and the people living there.
Very interesting approach indeed. Be a tourist in your own city and then discover new things, and also smaller distances sometimes. Elke, parking management is also an important aspect, in particular when there are key events and so on. And for this, it's also important to work with the private sector. Could you explain how you develop these public-private partnerships, in particular on parking management?
Parking is a big issue in every city. I think one of the biggest debates is space, how we redistribute space, what we do with the available public space. In every street where we take a lane for car park is a lane where we can't plant trees, where we can't put a cycle lane or create little parks or parklets. So it is a big debate, and so the big goal is to convince people to park off street and to gain space on street. That's easy said, but it's the biggest taboo in Brussels. So it's working with pricing and pricing regulations. So we have augmented, very popular in 2022, the price you pay on street parking, but it is necessary to guide people to off-street parking and making sure that off-street parking, which is often controlled by private companies, is more attractive. Also on safety, making sure that you feel safe in off-street parkings, which is especially for women often an issue. And so we do see ourselves as an ally to those private off-street parkings. We do create also public off-street parkings, especially in park and rides, making sure that you can, but the construction is often together with private initiatives, also for scan cars and everything. So it is an ecosystem where public and private partners work together, but the most important element in this debate is the mentality. It's changing mentality. People want. We have a big concert hall, for example, Forêt Nationale, Forest Nationale, where the big artists come. It's in the heart of a living area, but if everybody who comes from all over the country wants to drive their car right into the venue, and preferably really on stage, well, it becomes impossible. And so changing this mentality, using park and rides, and for the last mile taking the free bus stops, using the free public transport ticket you get. So we have this very strong connection that for every big event they can buy or you get a free use of public transport, a free use of park and ride. But this is all about mentality, changing habits, and that's difficult. Also in streets, so often people living in an apartment building where there's 10 apartments, you only have 2 parking spots in front of it, but everybody wants to be able to park there. So it's about explaining, changing habits, changing mentality, and that's something that we still have a long way to go.
Yeah, indeed. I heard some mayors, I will not say who said, which citizen would ask me to let his fridge on the streets? But everybody says, my car, I have a right to leave my car there. So
perhaps to look in the future is one thing that, because we talked about autonomous car this morning and how we need to regulate it, that's one of the elements that gives me some kind of hope that if you have autonomous cars, and there's many dangers and we need to regulate, but also advantages on road security, but also on parking, that it can drop you off at home and then go park itself, and then perhaps we can end this debate that the car park needs to be right on the spot where you need to be, and we can organize better and more rational the way we park. So I hope in a few years that this debate will enter a new paradigm.
Indeed, let's hope. Let's now move back to the EU dimension and the EU initiatives, also to see how they can support actually the change that you are driving in your cities. Eugenio, we have seen that there are so many initiatives and you have a lot of plans for Rome. How do you think you can use the different EU initiatives, and in particular maybe the one on sustainable tourism, to develop new elements to further go to sustainable mobility?
I think that Jubilee Recovery Fund are just momentum of in our era, and you have to use it before it fades. I mean, and so we're working on 3 fronts. The first one is try to transform the city from a car-oriented city in an intermodality city, the first thing. And so you have to work on infrastructure, on massive transport like metro lines, tramway lines, and also the railway, because in Rome we have a node, a railway node, very important. And so I think that these 3 assets are very crucial for our city. The second is the active mobility network. I think that we have to improve with more kilometers of bike lanes and cycle path, and I think that we're doing a good job, and until June we will have 140 kilometers of bike lane, and we're doing all the goals that EU policy just set on urban nodes. I mean that 10T regulations say that we have to do upsump until 2027. We did in 2022. They say that we have to transform the station and multimodal station, and we are doing it. In Termini, in Tiburtina, the main station, we are transforming that, and also the metro station. But let me say something directly, because I think this audience just deserve a direct conversation. I think that about the EU strategy for sustainable tourism, that cities are where the tourism happens. And the pressure lands on our street, the pressure lands on our metro lines, the pressure lands on our neighborhoods. And if you think that the European policy until now treating the city like something to promote, and if I ask this audience, do you believe that Barcelona has to be promoted, that Roma has to be promoted, that Stockholm has to be promoted, that Brussels has to be promoted? I don't think so. I think that we are partners to be resourced for what we do. And what we need from the EU strategy is not more promotion. We need regulatory frameworks that give cities real tools. That's the problem. We need TEN-T investment to actually reach city centers, not stop at the urban fringe. And we need the EU to recognize the sustainable tourism. But if you want to recognize sustainable tourism, you have to recognize sustainable mobility. And if you want to recognize sustainable mobility, you have to put money the city cannot raise alone. That is the problem. And so if you say to the city, okay, you have some goals to reach on that here, I think that you have to help us to reach that goals. That's the problem. I think that all the example here on the stage, but also the other city, are ready to be examples of what we have to do on sustainable mobility. That's not the problem. We have ever been ready to push on sustainable mobility. The problem now is the city cannot do it alone. And so we need a strong alliance between us, but also a big promotion of connectivity with the Europe instruments that they put for us. Because sometimes they say, okay, you can talk with national governments about this, but we cannot do that. The objective and the goals come directly from the Europe, not from the national government. But that is the point. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, very well summarized indeed. It's difficult to put new burdens to cities without helping them actually to overcome these new challenges. Maro, this morning in the political track we had a very good discussion also about the different tools, in particular the EU Sustainable Tourism Strategy. What do you remember from this discussion? What were the main points that cities expect from the European Commission, and also how do you think that the EU level measures could actually strengthen Athens' long-term efforts to balance tourism, accessibility and livability of your city?
I should like to stress in 3 points. The first one is the relationship between tourism and housing. The problem that the raise of the prices and the lack of availability of housing, it's very important in tourist regions, and it's more important in places where social housing policy has no tradition, has no weight in policies, like in Greece. So we have to make effort into, let's say, 2 directions. One is not to relate tourism investment so much to the real estate branch. I don't know how we can achieve this, how Europe could achieve this, but I think it's very important. In Greece, we have actually even confused in land use framework, we have confused tourism with housing by the invention of touristic home or something like that. So it's really important to be clear on that and enhance social housing policy even more in touristic regions. We have the problem not only in Athens but also in islands. Could you imagine that professors going in islands, they cannot rent, doctors going in islands cannot rent, cannot stay, because it's very expensive. So the second relationship, which is important to my opinion, and it's important for Greece, is to relate the tourism with the modern architectural heritage. It's obvious in Athens. I don't know whether it's also the case in other cities, but since the cultural funds are addressed more in antiquity and in classical antiquities, the modern buildings are very often abandoned due to problems of funding for the restoration or to multi-heritage problems and so on. So I think it should be an interesting branch if we could, if Europe could address funds in modern cultural architectural heritage, especially in historic centers in the cities, have to play an important role on that. Otherwise, those buildings are risking to be demolished and substituted by new hotels. The third is the relationship between housing, tourism, and mobility flows, as we stress all this morning and these days. Accessible public transport is very important. I guess it's not necessary to repeat things that have been said already, but I think that these three sectors, let's say, the mobility, the housing, and the cultural safeguarding, practically oblige us to see also the territorial cohesion as policy. I think we have forgotten to see the territorial cohesion in the early 2000s. We're speaking more about this, the spatial framework and so on. Now I think we have to regain this field of political thinking in order to help the integrated vision of things, the correlation with competitiveness and sustainability. It will help this idea of territorial cohesion, which is a little bit forgotten.
Thanks a lot. We have 10 minutes to have some questions from the audience and dialogue. And alongside the questions, we have also for you 2 polls that you can reply to in the meantime. So maybe you can do 2 things at the same time, replying to the poll about what is the biggest gap your city faces in managing mobility pressure linked to large events or tourism flows. So and then it can inspire us a little bit. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand, and Ariana will help me to give you the mic. There's already a question from Simona from Bologna.
Test. Pronto? Good afternoon to everybody. Just one simple question. How do you think is useful to manage in the public communication these common interest between tourists and local people? Because we have to say, at least this is my experience in Bologna, but I think in other cities that become tourists, maybe Rome is touristic from ages, but for Bologna, especially for the topic that she was mentioned from Athens, the cost of the apartments because of the tourism, that means the local people hate tourists. This is the popular feeling. And we have to face it when we say that we have backlash from local people because we are changing the public space. If we tell them we are doing for tourists, it's dangerous, not useful, in my experience. So what do you think about?
Anyone wants to reply? Has the solution? Yes.
It's one of the biggest debates also in Brussels. It's giving people the feeling that changes you make are making for them and with them. And cities communicating with their population is always a big challenge, especially in a city as Brussels. I don't think that tourists are the problem, so please all come to Brussels, but or not considered as a problem, but we have a lot of people temporarily working in Brussels, the UE institutions, international workers, and so you often feel this kind of negativity towards the bureaucrats, although we kind of love them because they bring fresh ideas and into the city. They also come with housing paid by the company often, so it has a huge impact. I think in the experience of Brussels that getting through the difficult phase of planning and executing is the most important one. Once it is in place, we have, for example, the biggest pedestrian area of Europe. Do come visit Brussels. I'm sorry, I'm promoting my city. I have to. It's one of the biggest pedestrian areas. It was a big fight to get it installed. A lot of activism and fights to get installed. But once it's there, it's good for habitants because it's a nice way to visit your city. It's good for tourists because you can walk around in the heart of the city. It is good for the economy around this area, the hotels, the bars, and having all this horeca. It's local jobs. You cannot delocate your local bar to China. You cannot delocate your hotel to China. So these are elements where you can find a win-win, but it is often to get through this first phase of change. And when change is in place, people can't imagine the before and support the reality once it's installed.
Thanks a lot. Do we have another question? Otherwise, maybe Ariana could read the result of the first poll and then we can move to the second question. Because from our side, it's not easy to...
I can. So the first question, and thanks for the 67 people that have replied so far, was what is the biggest gap your city faces in managing mobility pressure linked to large events or tourism flows? And the number one biggest gap at the moment is limited capacity in public transport or active mobility uptake. Up second is lack of cross-department coordination. And I think this is one of the topics that the EU strategy for sustainable tourism also is looking into addressing, how departments, mobility departments, destination managers, how they collaborate with each other. Third is insufficient stakeholder engagement with operator, business and tourism actor. And fourth is insufficient data on visitor flow or crowd movements. But political vision is only fifth, so congratulations to the panelists. It seems that political vision is not an issue. Anyone else that would like to ask a question?
And there's a second question, I think, for the poll as well.
Yes, we can move on to the second one. So the second one, you can now vote on the second one, which is which form of EU-level support would help you the most, or your city the most, manage tourism-related mobility pressure in a sustainable way? I will not read all the answers, but I'm sure answer will start coming in. In the meantime, anyone else that would like to ask a question to our panelists?
You're all waiting for the coffee break, maybe, so then maybe we can move to the conclusions. I will ask each of you in just 30 seconds to give your concluding remarks in one sentence. What's the single move cities must make in the next 5 years to stay ahead of the next mobility stress test for residents and for visitors? Lars?
Well, I think the answer is always cycling, and I think cycle tourism and creating better infrastructure for cycling, it benefits both.
If you take cycling, I will take children. Creating a city on the size of a child of 12 years, making sure he can cycle, walk, take public transport, play, go around when it's safe, it's healthy. That's a city that's good for our children, but will be good for everybody, also for tourists, also for business.
I'm sorry, I won't be emotional. In Rome, we need infrastructure for metro lines and train lines, because we have a big gap of that kind of infrastructure on railway within the other European city. And so we are a city of 3 million people with 1 million coming from the outside. So we need other metro lines and we need other tram lines. Of course, cycling, pathway, but the first priority is this one.
Cycling, some cities cycling is a luxury that we cannot afford. It's a problem. But anyway, for Athens, what I should like to stress is we need the infrastructure done in the sustainable mentality, because we are talking recently also about adding roads in Athens and having big investments in peripheral roads, which will accentuate the problem, I guess. But the big problem, to my opinion, and the big suggestion should be about the daily visitors by cruise. We have to control this with all means. And I'm speaking in behalf of a city which was planning to increase the city break tourism in confront of the previous model, which was sun, swim, what was the 3S's. But really, we are now in a way that we have to control, and we have to stop people starting by hating tourism. We have to change that, and it will be very important if we oblige the tour operators, which are multinational companies, to stop and to change mentality, because otherwise cities who are not very strong cannot interfere in that.
Thanks a lot, indeed. I think we have really we have seen that you and your cities, you're not improvising, but you have a clear plan. You learn from each other, you invest, you coordinate in smart ways, and thank you for this. I think what we have learned is that cities need investments, long-term investments, and they cannot deal with it alone. It's not only about the infrastructures, it's also about functioning the different mobility solutions in the long run. It's about coordination. That is something that is very important across departments with different stakeholders. Otherwise, it will not manage. We need behavioral change, and thus also communication, of course, from all the different people for long-term livability. And finally, also mobility and tourism cannot be imposed. So it's the same people that are citizens maybe in one city and tourists elsewhere. So we need to see how we can actually drive the change both locally, saying that indeed citizens can become tourists in their own cities, but also maybe they can see what works very well, and maybe they behave sometimes in a more sustainable way as a tourist when they come back, or sometimes the other way around. Maybe they should not forget their good practices at home when they travel also. Thanks a lot for these very insightful discussions, and I think we have now the time indeed to have a coffee break before heading to the next plenary session. Thanks a lot.
On the stairs outside.